Welcome to Tuesday Talks with Shawnee Alliance Church.
It is our desire to invite you into conversations about the life topics and questions we all face.
Wherever you are in your faith journey, we invite you to explore the freedom found in a transformed life.
Hello, welcome to the podcast today, where we're going to do a 2021 podcast year in review. I am Sarah, and I'm here with Bridgett today.
Hello.
And we're glad to be here and just to kind of do an overview. Just to hit some of the highlights and maybe what people might want to look back on or dream about for the next year.
Yeah.
So when I was taking a little bit of time to look back on the Tuesday Talks, the topics, listened to a little bit excerpts from the different podcasts we've done this year, I love that we have taken time to, number one, bring new language to some terms that have been misused maybe in our teaching.
Yeah.
Well, like in our learning growing up.
Correct.
Like,
as we've been studying with Jesus
Yes.
or our faith community
Right.
or whatever. Yeah.
or because of how society defines things. So we've talked about things like grief, conviction, guilt, shame, miracles, and even sex.
Yeah.
You know, we've broached lots of different topics. And then we've talked in depth about trauma, emotional health, and the value of living in community. The importance of honoring others, even if we don't agree with them. Like lots of cool things in many areas of our life. So what sticks out to you when you think about all the different podcast episodes from this year?
I think the cool thing, so we're at, this episode I think will be our 81st or 82nd episode, depending on where we're at. And so we've had over 11,000 downloads. Cool. So that's 11,000 opportunities for people to hear our voices. No, that just that we've been able to have that conversations. And I think the reason we started the podcast a couple years ago was we really wanted to give language. Like that was the reason we started. The heart behind all of this was that if you are having conversations in your family about grief or miracles or sex or trauma or whatever it may be, like sometimes you just don't have the right language of like, I know the healthy thing is for us to have a conversation about this,
Sure.
but I don't know how to.
Yeah.
And I think one of the greatest responses I've had from people, you know, whatever your job, whatever your age, whatever your background, of people saying, hey, I was able to listen to this and share this with my spouse, my sister, my coworker, my whoever it may be. And so for me, that's really cool. And so I'm thankful for all of the people, you know, the 11,000 listens that people have chosen to make time in their schedule to listen to us, that they have just come with their questions and their heart and have processed their story and, shared how our words have impacted. So I just know I'm really grateful for this opportunity. I think for me, some of my favorite conversations were ones around sexuality. I really enjoyed, we did those with you, Josh, and I did those. I was talking to Josh yesterday or the day before, and he's like, you're insane. I was like, what would it look like if we actually talked about what I'm going to call sexual discipleship? What does it mean to us to actually be really rooted and grounded in God's design for sexuality, and what does it mean for us to be people who are really connected to our stories, that have walked through traumatic experiences that we've had, whether that's been abuse or whether that's just been overexposure or whatever it may be. What does it look like for us to live really whole and healed in that and to continue to grow? And for me, the whole topic of sexuality has been a real passion of mine this past year. I feel like I've done a lot of my own personal study and my own personal trauma healing in those areas to walk through. So I love those conversations. I love being able to share with parents as they have, these are great conversations I have with my teenagers. It's really cool, hearing spouses talk about, hey, it provided me some language to be able to have for us. And, as people are trying to figure out how to date well, what does it look like for me to have conversations around boundaries and honoring bodies and things like that in the context of relationships. So I think for me, those are probably some of my favorites. I also really like the ones about miracles.
Yeah.
And what does it look like to hold the tension of heaven and earth, and God's desire for us isn't necessarily always what we see when we have to watch or process through a hard season. I really enjoyed those episodes.
Yeah. Well, and literally going back and listening to little excerpts of them, I was like, wow, we have covered a lot of ground. And I'm also very thankful to be part of many of those conversations, not just recorded here, but in staff in our time, just to learn and grow and know that we're standing right with every listener. Because we are literally learning this as we're going.
Absolutely.
And it is great to be in that place of, I don't know, this
Learning.
Yeah.
I think the cool thing about podcasting has been just really breaking the narrative that we're experts, because in no way, shape, or form are we experts.
Exactly.
And just that, the learning along with people. So we're not sharing things because our perspective on whatever the topic may be is the end all be all, but it's just because this is what we've processed and what we've learned. And I think that when you, even if you don't agree, there's plenty of room in any topic that we talk about to say, hey, like, I like you, but I don't agree with what you said. Just to be able to learn together, and we learn. I feel like when we hear other people's stories, it gives us an internal GPS that says, okay, like, this is where I am. I'm trying to orient my direction here, and it helps me just kind of process my own life story when I can hear other people's experience and go, okay, cool, like, this is a common thing, or, oh, what I experienced was different, and so, whatever it may be.
Well, and from hearing those other experiences, you also get practical steps of, not only the knowledge, but hey, these are some suggestions or some ways that this has worked for other people, so maybe I could try that.
Yeah.
Those practicalities are great, I think. So in thinking back again about the end of the year here and wrapping up this season of the podcast, we've talked several times about season words. So mine last year was presence. So not just, being in the same room together. Obviously, right now we're in the same room, but being engaged, being intentional. And yes, with people, but also at home, because sometimes we want, after a day of work or running errands or whatever the case may be, you want to go and just kind of veg out or disengage. But just being intentional in the presence, and then also feeling the presence of God and choosing to show up in that relationship as well.
Yeah, how has that, setting that intention for presence this year, what do you feel like you've noticed?
Well, sometimes it's hard because life still happens. And again, I'm not claiming to have achieved it, but I do like that God gives those words that, this is what you're working on, or this is what I'm working on through you. And just, okay, I'm here. I can slow down. I can set aside my task list because you know me, I'm analytical, I'm task oriented. And sometimes if that is overwhelming my brain, it's hard to stop that to be present in something else.
Yeah, that's good. I was listening to another podcast this morning and a little bit yesterday. And one of the things they were talking about was like the freedom of restriction. Right. And so basically the idea, and they were talking about it in the context of marriage, of like when you commit your life to one person, like you're saying no to billions of other humans, right? You're saying, no, I'm not going to marry you. I'm going to marry you. But in that, like, you then have the freedom to flourish like the most beautiful intimacy that you couldn't give to 7 billion people. You, like, your heart has the capacity to do that with one person. And so I think about, the freedom of restriction in season words, because it's kind of that idea is like, well, Sarah, like, God brought you healing, God brought you hope. Like, how can you just say, I'm just going to focus on God's presence or being present, right? But in that, like, now you have the freedom to explore presence in a way that if you gave your yes to everything, right, you'd only have a little bit of attention to give to each of those things because you haven't set the boundaries of, no, I'm just staying present.
Yeah.
And I think,
I'm still working on that one.
Yes. And so I think for me, that's why I really like season words, is because I call it, and we've talked about this in some of you can go back and listen to some of the other episodes we've done on season words, but it gives me an anchor point for the season to go, okay, I'm just giving my life to this thing. So for me, my season word has been restoration this year. And kind of in that, I kind of give it chapter titles of linger longer, which means I've had to go low and slow. And I am not your low and slow gal. I like everything, all of the things right now, right away. And my brain works like that. Like my brain's just very much like, well, here's all the 5,000 possibilities. I don't have to have all 5,000 possibilities, but I need to talk about all 5,000 possibilities. So this whole like lingering longer thing is very interesting. And then the uproot religion was, I felt like it was part of that too. And just doing a lot of intentional work in my own story to say, where has religion written a narrative about myself, my calling, my Jesus, that God never had intended for me. And that's been really, really painful. I think what you said about it being hard, like, it's not like we just frolic through the sunflowers and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited to pay attention to the presence of God. But it's like, no, like this is going to cost me, like me diving into what I feel like the Lord has given me an invitation to study with him, to grow with him.
Sure. Yes.
It means I'm going to have to confront all the places in my life where I haven't given my heart to this before. And so I think that's kind of one of the hardships of the yes. It's the beauty of obedience, but it's also the hardship of saying, when I set some vision, when I set some intention, I have to address all of the places in me where I've lived with lack in this area.
Sure.
And that's hard work.
It is. It is. And it's that continual process. And it's good. So in that, because from our season words, from, everything else, it does help us to like slow down, and you use the terminology when we were talking, make meaning of it. So unpack that a little bit more.
Well, I'm totally going to butcher the Bible theology right here, but I'm just going to ask for grace. The Israelites, they would make the stone, the like stacks of stone for remembrance. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
You see them hiking while you're hiking in the woods now.
Yeah.
People stack the little.
Correct.
Yeah,
But like that was
There's a name of that.
That was an Old Testament thing that people did. And Chris, don't fire us. I'm just kidding. Anyways, so this idea of making meaning or marking significant moments, I think that naming, it's kind of like giving a chapter title.
That's good.
Of these are just a bunch of words on a page until I say, oh, this chapter is about presence. This chapter is about restoration. This chapter is about hope. And it gives you the parameters for your yes as well. For me, that's really helpful. But the making meaning part is that this is significant, and it assigns value. It assigns value to what's happening inside of me compared to just some like, well, whatever will happen, will happen. And I don't really have the language for it, but I'm just going to go back to it matters. Like it establishes, I think we all have that cry to say like, please see me. Sure. Please see who I am. Please acknowledge my contribution. Please love me. Like we are wired for that. That's not a selfish thing. Sure. And so when you can sit with God and say, hey, like, I'm going to choose to align myself with the fact that you're bringing hope here, or whatever your word may be. Just kind of helps settle things down a little bit.
Sure. And it's kind of like realigning your foundation back to your identity in Christ. We've talked about that lots over the last couple of years too.
Because New Year's resolutions, right? We talked about this forever. Like, let's lose 20 pounds this year, or let's exercise every day, or let's read 100 books, or whatever and those are all great. Those are all great goals. I have no problem with any of those things, but we can misplace our identity when it's in accomplishing something.
Right.
Where with the setting the intention or setting the season word, it's that I'm just being present to what God's already doing. Right. It takes this pressure off of I don't actually have to. I mean, obviously, what I build, right, my behavior out of my intentions are going to be beautiful. They're going to be right if my, let's just say my season word is growth, right? Then maybe what you're doing with your finances, maybe you are investing some finances and you're making some money, or maybe you are trying to be healthier with your food choices. But it's because that's already the work that's happening in your heart. It's not that I'm trying to do some outside activity.
It's not a new list of things to do.
Correct. It's not a to-do list.
Yeah.
It's like my choices will reflect what's happening in my heart. And for me, like those are, let's even because dieting is probably one of the largest, New Year's resolutions people have. Like the reason why diets don't last and people find themselves in a situation where they're like, oh, well, I was really good in this season, but then I'm, sorry, bad language. I was following a really strict guideline in this season, and I was a different size or a different athletic ability or whatever it may be.
Right.
It's all done with like, I'm afraid of being unhealthy, or I'm afraid of being what society says is not appropriate, or whatever it may be. But when we have the intention, it's I actually really love me. And I really love what God's doing in me. And so all of the choices that I make, from the way that I read the Bible, to the food that I'm eating, to the places that I'm going, to the sermons I'm preaching, to the books I'm reading, all of those things all now are centered back to, but this is what God said he wanted to do inside of me. And so now everything reflects what he's doing.
Great.
Compared to trying to God, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know where you are. I feel so scattered. I don't know what's happening. But I think even holding that, what do you do when things are terrible? I think about, in a lot of ways, I've been really disappointed that my word has been restoration, because restoration for me this year didn't look like I wanted it to.
Right.
And so in that place, I think even the hope that holds me to is to say, hey, Jesus, everything feels destroyed and shattered, but you told me to restore this. You told me that's what you're doing in me, and you've never lied to me before. And so even in the midst of hard things, I mean, this year we've said as a staff, we've been part of more funerals this year than any other in our church history.
Right.
The level of loss this year, not only just in jobs or COVID or whatever it may be, physical lives that our family, our people, people that are listening, we're not shouting hallelujah and saying, well, if you just had your God word that your life would be good. But we're saying that no, they're the things that have kept us secure, even when we've lost family members, when dreams didn't work out the way we thought they would, or finances have changed, or whatever it may be, when we're in the middle of situations that we cannot control and we cannot change. I know I can speak for me personally, having the anchor phrase is no, but God, I know who you promised me you'd be.
Right.
And even though I don't have all the answers for all the other things, you are going to be who you promised me you'd be. And that just helps. It helps me stay secure when in a world that's so frazzled. And
yeah, because we're not, what's the word here? Exempt from experiencing that.
Correct.
It's just leaning into it. So here to close out the year, we have some self-reflection questions, which I think are really great. Some we may answer, some we may just have you go ahead and ponder over for a while. But the first question we have is, what do I know about God this year that I did not know this time last year? Wow, and we were talking earlier, and I just shared just a simple thing that came to my mind, and then I'll kind of unpack it. But I complicate things. How God speaks with clarity and simplicity isn't always, I think it should be different. or I think I need to follow a certain mold or whatever. And then my season word, like we talked about, of presence, it was something that encouraged me many times to just sit down, be present with people and God in my quiet time. And it required what I called a brain hush moment. Because, sometimes I get up and my brain has already gone through the first 20 things that I need to do.
Yeah. Can you share, because I want people to get the practicality of what this means. So can you talk about your chair you got for your office?
Yeah.
You had a really good statement. You said that buying the chair made you, forced you to have some space where you could slow down for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So I had 2 nice just sitting chairs in there, and then I got a bigger armchair that, that's a space where I can I'm in the same room, I'm still doing my work, but I can go over, sit in my chair. Other people can come in and sit as well.
We all do.
And just have a space to, if I need to sit down and read a chapter, in a book or in the Bible or whatever, I have that space. Or if I need to sit down and make a phone call, I have that space. Just a little space to, disengage and move forward. So, I forgot about that. But, thank you for those small reminders.
I just think that, we get afraid of, oh, my gosh, how am I going to make space for this big new change in my life? And it's no, it's the really simple little things. It's engaging in the conversations. It's making space in your home or in your workspace to have the new intention. It's not always some big, I have to shout hallelujah and have this big encounter with God. Sometimes it's really practical of, how do I just engage with what God's doing in my everyday life at mealtime, with my family, with my friends, with the books I'm reading. So I just thought that was a really cool part of it.
It is. And I also realized, in that thought process, that religion has clouded my understanding of the character of Christ. So, I was raised in a Christian home, saved at a young age. I learned about the Bible, right? I learned about the stories. I studied Scripture. But I very often missed the application of the principles that I was reading or studying or knowing. So that just helps me too. When you sit in the presence, God, what is your intention? What is the practicality behind this? Because I don't want a lot of information that's not usable. Not that Scripture isn't usable, but it's that head knowledge or that heart understanding. And then I just read a devotion yesterday. And I'm quoting this part of it, but it says, reframing your thoughts isn't a choice to ignore the realities of your situation.
Yeah.
It's a choice to factor God back into the equation, to remember who He is and what is true in the middle of what feels scary and overwhelming. I love that because I thought it summarized a lot of what I had been learning.
Yeah. I feel like for me, the biggest, I've said this 4,000 times because I feel like it's been one of the things that have been birthed inside of me just because of the year, is God is everything He promised me He'd be. And I've said that a lot as declaration because there's been a lot of days that have felt very much the opposite. Very much the, God, this is not what I signed up for. I don't actually know if I believe you. I don't actually know if I believe that you're in control or that you care or that you're sovereign. I've had to wrestle through all of those things. Obviously all throughout my life, but just this year particularly. And so I've had to say that a lot as a declaration in those moments of spiral of, no, God, I'm convinced that you are everything you promised me you'd be, that you are peace, that you are love, that you do work everything together for good. And then through that, I think the companion piece has been the grieving well will save your life. I have spent, probably 3 years just really diving into grief and drawn to it in a really weird way of I just feel like this is something that I really want to study and understand the neuroscience of it and the spiritual complex. I just it's so weird. I'm who does that? Who says, oh, I want to go study grief? But
we all have for the last 6 months.
Yes. Yes. that place to go.
Yeah.
No, but when I literally have no understanding of how I'm physically going to survive the day. Like, grief will be the thing that keeps me alive, because I'm not wallowing, not Eeyore, but grief will be the thing that says, no, like, God, this is really who I am. This is really what I need from you, and I cannot do this without you. I didn't know that about God last year. I just, I hadn't been aware of his beauty and the son of suffering that actually enters into the shattered places of our story with us and actually holds us there and has authority there, not because he can just live a life perfect and didn't, experience it, but because he actually knows what sorrow feels like, and he's lived in Christ's victory there too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really leads us, what you learned this year, into the next question for everyone to think about. What do you need to grieve?
Yeah.
And when I was thinking about that, I mean, I don't know that I landed on something, but I did land on, hey, anytime I feel disappointment, what is the root there?
Correct.
It's kind of like, what is that feel that always kind of triggers you? And identifying it and recognizing it and just saying, okay, well, I'm going to refocus my foundation on what the truth is, and then let's figure this out. And I think that's part of the growing process. So that's just something to think about.
Yeah, I think it's important to honor like all the layers of it, because I think when we say grief, we typically, our brains go, well, I only can grieve catastrophic losses, right?
Right.
But I think about like what are the dreams that were unfulfilled, or what are the vacations you had to cancel, or even things like that, like what's the guest room you didn't get painted that you wanted to? And for me, I just am like, those all really matter, because you will, your body will say, well, I just don't want to show up again. If you don't give space to say, oh, this, again, making meaning, right? If I don't actually give myself space to grieve and say, I really am disappointed that didn't happen, or I really am disappointed that I wasn't able to take this trip, or whatever it may be, to keep your body like available to hope. That's funny language, but that's cool. I'm going to go with it. Keeping your body available to hope means you have to grieve what's going on. And so we welcome that permission in your own story, that whatever it may be, whatever comes to your mind, hey, well, just go with it. Journal it, talk it out, walk it out, whatever you need to do.
And the next question is, what can I celebrate? So that's almost the other end of the spectrum there. But we mentioned earlier, this was the thing that came to my mind. There's freedom in letting God deal with the details. I love that. Because I'm, again, that task, that detail person, but if I can let go of some of that.
I think the celebrating piece, learning to celebrate even those things of like the things that I'm called to do and I'm gifted to do are typically the place where I've had the most turmoil, right? So what does it look like to celebrate? Like, oh, I actually love details. I love organization. I love that. And also that's a place where I've had to, because you've had to sift through what's my identity and what am I performing out of.
Right.
Because they feel very similar. And I've had to do the same of like, as a person who loves language, who brings a lot of safety in situations, I've had a lot of turmoil of like, but I have to believe that I'm safe. I have to believe that God takes care of me. And so that celebration piece is, it's celebrating the beautiful moments, but also celebrating like, cool, like, I like who I am. Like, that's a great celebration.
Yeah.
Or I have a better awareness of my needs. Like, that's great. Or I have a better awareness that I need to take a break. Like, what a great thing to celebrate of like, oh, I actually am not Superwoman. Like, I can't do it all. Like, that's actually really good for me to learn and to celebrate that. Or, celebrating, hey, I was able to have a hard conversation that I was really scared to have. Like, celebrate all of it.
Yeah.
Love it. One of the other questions we have written down is, what do you need this next year? When you've been in a really hard season, whatever it may be. And it may not be for you this year. Maybe you've had a really good year, but just with our cultural context of a global pandemic, like having to brace and having to be so open-handed and to have so many things change and to have so much loss, like to set your body up for success, to say, hey, like, we are going to have fun, right? I do need some fun this year. Or, hey, I need to make more space for getting up earlier and having some time with God, or getting up earlier and just sitting and having a cup of coffee by myself, like making space for those things. I was having a good conversation with some people this morning, and we just talked about, like, hey, like, when you choose to make space for your needs, like, you will offend other people, and you will disrupt the norm that will cause some conflict, because you're putting something new in place maybe you haven't before. And so just kind of having that permission of, like, yeah, maybe you're the person that is like, oh yeah, sure, like, I'll do everything, and to say, oh, actually, I need to make sure that I can be at my kid's basketball game every Thursday, whatever it may be. So just kind of giving that space is, if that question, what do you need this year, sends some anxiety through you, like, how the heck do I even know what I need?
Which was my first reaction. Like, wow, that's a big question.
And we've been so programmed out of addressing our own needs. But I had a professor that always say, you know when you're knower. Like, you are designed by God to know who you are and what you need. And so if you will give yourself space, like, go with that, oh, I'm actually needing some more connection here, or I'm actually really needing some help, and I need to reach out and talk to someone about this because I feel really stuck. Like, if you'll pause enough, and whether that's you take a half hour to sit down with these questions or whatever it may be, if you'll just pause for a minute, trust yourself that you actually know what you need a lot more than you think you do. And if that fails, like, you try again. I had a funny situation the other day where I was like, hey, like, I need to just create a little bit of space just to, like, slow down for a little bit. And by doing that, it ended up, like, putting me an hour behind, and it messed up my plans to do that, and I left feeling like that was annoying and none of my needs got met. I was like, this is really frustrating. But I was like, hey, at least I tried. So it's that part of that celebration piece of, like, hey, like, at least I tried. Like, I found out that didn't work for me. But at least I tried to reach out. And so it's okay if there's some failure along the way of, oh, this wasn't exactly the way to do it.
And one final question, who do you want to be? That's another big one. It has a lot of intentionality behind it. Like you mentioned a little bit ago, we've had to bury a lot of people this year. And the one thing in the last memorial service that I was sitting through that came through my mind, what would those who know me say about me if this was my service? What would I want them to say? Like, am I living that way right now? That was, so when we were talking about these questions and I was processing through, what character qualities do I want to hold? I was kind of taken back to that and that thought. And I don't know the one answer. Again, I think that's did I point people to Jesus? Did I? Because I'm not perfect. Did they see my failure more than, all that self-talk that you kind of go into, like, when you think about that. But I just want to show up and be who God needs me to be, in every situation, and be open to change, when He calls me to do something different, or just believe that He's got it all worked out, and I don't. I can walk in freedom knowing that I don't have to know all the details right now. I just need to take the next step.
Yeah. I think as you you focus more on the who do you want to be question. I notice I freak out way less about what I'm supposed to do when I'm like, no, but who do I want to be?
Yeah.
I want to be a person who grieves well. I want to be a person of peace. I want to be a person who honors rest. Like when I can name those things, then I go, okay, well, yeah, I'm in a situation where either option that I pick feels really hard and scary.
Sure.
But choosing the option that gives me the most space to be a kind person, to be a loving person, to be a forgiving person, like whatever decision I make, like I'm leaning back into that place. And for me, I feel like that's taken the pressure off of, did I pick the right decision or did I do the right thing? It's did this choice lead me deeper into the person I want to be? And there are times when the answer is no.
Sure.
And we learn and we go, oh, wait a second. Like that decision I made out of fear, or that decision I made out of control, or that decision I made out of fearing people's opinion of me, or whatever it may be. But again, you learn from it and you go, okay, like, again, it's celebrating it. Oh, I tried.
Sure.
I didn't get it right. But I gave my best effort to try. And I can go back to that place of, all right, who do I want to be?
Yeah. Yeah. And even just asking God that. There's been a couple of very, pointed questions that I've had for him this year, and his answer to me is so simple. Like, that's what I'm amazed at. And just leaning into that. So we're going to close with a couple verses from Psalms. We were talking about this a little bit before we recorded today. And in Psalm 62, we're going to do verse 5 through 8. It says, "Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation." There's that declaration. "He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times. Pour out your heart to him, for God is our refuge." What a great reminder. At all times, we can pour out our heart to him, and we can find rest, protection, hope, all the good things, regardless of our situation.
Yeah. That's good.
So that ends our time for today. It's been a great season of podcasts, and we want you to know that there is a email address out there. So if you have any questions that you'd like to hear answered on the podcast, or if you have podcast suggestions, topics, that kind of thing, just send us an email, podcast@shawneealliance.com, and we will put that in the queue for up and coming.
Yep. And then we will go ahead and post these questions. So if you haven't been able to take notes, but you wanted the self-reflection questions as we're ending the year, we'll go ahead and put them in the show notes. You can go ahead and check them out there. And we just hope that, as the year closes in these next couple of days, that you would be able to take some time to sit with Jesus and to sit with your own heart, and kind of develop a game plan on where to go next and where God's leading you. So we're so thankful. Blessings on the close of 2021, and we welcome the new thing that God wants to do in 2022. We'll see you all next time.